who would like to deliver a short statement to the committee. Before that, I'll quickly have another 2 or 3 announcements to make. The first announcement is regarding tonight's social event and tomorrow's social event. Tonight's social event was, I think, just called social event, and consisting of dances and whatever. And tomorrow's social event was a global village consisting of you, basically, and people bringing along stuff for a great fair where everyone can walk around and eat and drink internationally. Those 2 social events will be happening tonight. The time frame stays the same. They're just combining the dances and the food. Because tomorrow we are going to go to an open air event, if the weather permits, because due to the upcoming expo, there's apparently a great group of rather famous Russian singers in town, and they're going to be performing at some kind of event. That's all I know. I'm afraid I have no idea where we're going, who they are, if it's going to be good. It's certainly going to be great. So be prepared that tonight is going to be the dances and the food and drink. That's all the information I have. And tomorrow there's going to be an outdoor event, if the weather permits that, and we're going to be spoiled with some amazing Russian and local music, apparently. Apart from that, we've got the delegate for the observer of the Human Rights Watch wanting to make a statement to the committee. After that, I'll allow questions or remarks or rebuttals by delegates who would wish to speak. Please, every single delegate afterwards, make sure you don't speak for longer than a minute in your response to that. You may speak more than once. And after that is done, I'll say how we're going to proceed this afternoon. But I'll first then give the floor to the Human Rights Watch if there's not any more questions or other issues to be raised. That's not the case. Good. And I suppose everyone has my email address and stuff by now to make sure you know whom to send any data to. I think Kyrgyzstan is back with us. Is that correct? Yes, no, perhaps? Kyrgyzstan? Is that you? Right? Okay, she's not yet there. Fair enough. Human Rights Watch, please, you have the floor.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear chair, delegates. First of all, we are, as a representative of Human Rights Watch organization, NGO organization, I want to say thank you for all delegates sitting here, diligence for protection of human rights, for their trying to do something. And after, I want to say a little bit about human rights. Human rights are moral principles or norms which describe certain standards or norms of human behavior and regularly protected as legal rights and municipal and international law. And after about our organization, Human Rights Watch is a non-governmental organization which deals with the violation of human rights almost in all states. So what I want to say a little bit critical speech. Here is we saw that every state sitting here, except I think Egypt, they're saying saying something like how to say. They don't want to see something critical in their countries, in their states. I saw this this note I saw only in Egypt, that they say that in our country we have this problem, and we want to solve these problems. We're trying, but all the others, we saw that they are saying we did this one, but with I how to say, the Human Rights Watch, our organization, we are always ready to cooperate with all delegates, with all states in all the world, all over the world. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you to the observer from the Human Rights Watch for your short intervention and for your reaffirmation. Oh, sorry, I can't speak and write at the same time. That you're still willing to cooperate with all nations, even those who, in your opinion, perhaps don't always own up to the human rights violations they commit or that are being committed within their borders. Are there any replies or questions from delegates in the committee? If so, please raise your placard so it can be recognized and be given the floor to make any reply or comment. That is apparently not the case. Are there any delegates wishing to be added or added again to the speakers list in the general debate statements round? That is also not the case. So with that, this part of the conference has elapsed of 10 or 11 delegates, at least physically present. 10 have made their statements. It is now time to move into the thematic debate statement phase, but I have the feeling that most people will not yet be ready to deliver their statements for various reasons, which are all perfectly acceptable. So I would suggest that we actually stick to the plan of commencing with thematic debate statements tomorrow morning. Let me make a few more remarks beforehand on how to go about preparing those statements and so forth. We have 3 topics to consider. Topic A is how to protect human rights whilst countering terrorism. Be aware that you are part of the Human Rights Council. This is not the Security Council. It's not DISEC. So we're not talking about security questions. It's not our job to define how to best counter terrorism. We're not the ones developing strategies how to counter terrorism. We are the ones reacting to those strategies. I can only point you to the report. On that topic, it's only 2 pages long, I think, and it mentions 5, I think, different issues and topics. There's one on the treatment of prisoners from Afghanistan and Iraq, especially. That would be the delegate of Iraq could be speaking on that, by United States of America's secret services and investigative services, and the European Union's complicity in that. That is one of the subplots. There's something on drone strikes, which is something people could be talking about. And there's more things which I can't think of right now because I'm trying to make a broader point here. But you'll see them. Read through that again. Think about what's important to you, and have a look at, in Annex A, the list of resolution that has been published on that topic by the Human Rights Council. And you'll probably find some things in there to talk about. I guess if you have a look at the last 4 or 5, just quickly skim them, you'll see some points that will be of interest for you. Be aware that we're trying to talk about, whilst countries are doing whatever they're doing, how can we ensure that human rights are being respected? We can, of course, say, okay, drone strikes are forbidden completely. Or we can try to say that. I'm not sure there's a majority for that. But don't invent any new forms of countering terrorism. It's about protecting human rights while countering terrorism. We're talking about the human rights part. DISEC talks about the countering terrorism part. They are responsible for security questions. That's the stuff I'd like to say with regard to the human rights question. The second topic is developing a international and legally binding instrument, so basically a law that will regulate transnational businesses. So that's businesses that maybe come from one country, operate in another country, they transcend national borders, and it's about businesses that deal in a way that sometimes inhibits human rights. As one example, the Coca-Cola group oftentimes build their Coke factories in places and drain the rivers surrounding it and so forth. But the local government does nothing against it because obviously there's a lot of money coming in by Coca-Cola. How can we work against stuff like that? But it's also about unfair investment, exploitation of people, all those things. And the UNHRC has been trying for the last 4 or 5 years, I'm not sure, to develop such an instrument. There have been symposiums on that. The report gives a report of that, basically. And there have been first resolutions. Do read into some of those and think about what might be the next steps to go about. The final resolution does not have to be that legally binding instrument. But you should put in some points what should be sort of kept in mind in there. Have a look once again at the resolutions that already have been passed, the last 3 or 4, see what they've done and see how you can formulate in that into 2 or 3 points that are close to your country's position. The third topic is indigenous peoples' rights. 10 years ago, the United Nations passed a UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Be aware of the definition of indigenous peoples. I had one statement, the person's not here so I can say that, who talked about indigenous peoples in her country, where I'm pretty sure there's no acknowledged indigenous peoples. What she meant was people who did not migrate there. That's not what meant by indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples would be Native Americans in the United States of America, for example, the Maori in New Zealand, the Aborigines in Australia. Okay, US is here, but those are examples from countries that are not here. Have a look what your country has as populations. I think Mongolia has a certain rather large parts of population that are classified as indigenous peoples. Another question is, are those peoples afforded the rights that are prescribed for them in all kinds of declarations? You'll find that oftentimes they are not. And how does one go about doing that? As an example, last week, the New Zealand government, I think it was in Parliament, I'm not sure about the details, but they passed an act by sort of the initiative of the Maori people. They passed an act that will, no selfies please, they passed an act that will now afford legal status to a river. So whenever something ought to be done to that river can have a lawyer in court defending it. Now, obviously, a river is not a real person, but it's a step towards recognizing that this is part of the Maori heritage. I'm not saying it's a perfect way, but that is a step. On the other hand, Australia, once again, those are 2 countries that are not here, so I can say that without unfairly giving advantage to anyone here. Australia is a country often criticized for how they're dealing with the Aboriginal people still today. They don't have a representation in Parliament. If they're elected, fair enough, but if they're not represented. So those are things to consider. Perhaps one thing to consider and one thing to focus on is how to ensure that indigenous people can have their political participation rights. Take New Zealand, for example. They have a certain quota of Maori people in their parliament. And that means they can always, have legislative interests debated. Australia doesn't have that. That means the Aborigines might be left out of such issues. Perhaps think about what your country's position is on that. Now, that's been a short or perhaps long discussion of the 3 agenda items, what I think is important in them. I think you will have heard some of those things. I'm quite sure you will also be having more questions, and there's going to be time for questions soon. What I suggest you do is think about which 2 topics of those 3 are most important to you. I'd rather have you focus on 2 topics and kind of ignore the third, but give 2 really good speeches and have 2 really good draft resolutions on 2 topics, than have 3 medium good resolutions in the end. We are going to debate all 3 topics, and we're hopefully going to vote on all 3 topics. But if, for example, the United States, now they're here, that example, if Australia really does not want to do anything about their Aborigine problem, then maybe either they'll focus on topic A and B and ignore C completely, or they'll make sure they focus on C to make sure they frustrate any efforts to sort of regulate them even further. So find the 2 topics you're most interested in as a country. If you have no idea what your country would be most interested in, or if they're interested in all 3 topics, just choose the 2 you'd like to focus on most. And then prepare perhaps one longer and one shorter speech on, one topic and the other topic. So choose your core topic and choose your second topic. And you can then easily kind of ignore the third topic. And we're still going to have speeches in all 3 topics, because I'm quite sure every topic will have countries voting for it and speaking for it. And that also reduces the number of resolutions you have to write. Choose your main topic you're focusing on. Choose your secondary topic. Like, I'll just say, be prepared to give a 4-minute speech tomorrow on your main topic. Give a 2-minute speech on your secondary topic. If they're both 4 minutes long, fine. If one is 3 and the other is 4, fine. If one is 1.5 minutes, the other is 3, also fine. I'm just giving you some guidelines. And feel free to ignore the third topic you're not into. And then also make sure you start thinking about what's important for a resolution. So what points do you want to get across? And I think a way that always helps me with doing that is, sit down, read those 2 or 3 pages of report that I've put down on that topic. It's not much, it's not too heavy. You can even just skim it. You don't have to read it very carefully. Look for inspiration, perhaps read another resolution, and then put down 2, 3, 4 bullet points, not more. And then work from that. Turn that into 2 or 3 clauses and turn it into a speech. And if you do that, you're more than well prepared for tomorrow, and we can really get it started. Because I notice you've been lagging behind because there's different levels of preparation today, and that's not your fault. I know that that's probably the conference's fault, but things have been going this way and that way. I hope we got everyone together now and we got you started. I would suggest now in 2 or 3 minutes that someone raises a motion to adjourn until tomorrow morning. So ending the session for today. We switch off microphones, and I will stay here until 6 o'clock. So if you've got any questions, feel free to approach me. If you're like, oh, well, I'm New Zealand, and I'm not sure which topic I should choose, I'm not going to tell you which topic to choose, but I'm very prepared to hear your arguments on why you might want this or that topic and give my thoughts on that. So I'm happy to help you, because I'm really looking forward to having some, proper, good, interesting and diverse debate tomorrow. And we always have Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International to criticize you for whatever you're saying. So perhaps sometimes they can even jump in and try to frustrate your efforts, and you will have to defend yourself. That might be interesting. We'll see how it goes. But I've got a feeling that is a way forward that most of you can somewhat live with. Any objections? Okay. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting until tomorrow? Burundi, you have the floor. What's your motion?
I suppose we will be able tomorrow discuss how to improve human rights in Africa in today's situation. for example, Burundi and other countries where we have something like civic war, civic conflicts, where human rights is violated day by day.
Right. So, if I understood correctly, your suggestion is to talk about how to improve human rights in Africa tomorrow, which basically means you're trying to change the agenda, add another topic, or even strike the others in favor of that, which can be done. I've got a feeling someone else would have something to say. Let me quickly say how that is done, because I've marked the thing down in my rules of procedure somewhere. So the way it stands right now, it's hard to read and talk at the same time. The way it stands right now, we would actually talk about the 3 topics I just laid out, ABC, tomorrow. And that is pretty much what the Secretary General proposed for this session. However, the Council has the right, if it so wishes, to change the agenda. And I'll quote from the relevant thing in a minute. There we go. Page 5. So, at each session, the provisional agenda, this is what we have now, report has been there. Items on the agenda, Rule 21. Items on the agenda may be amended or deleted by the committee by a majority of the members present and voting. During a special session, items may be added to the agenda by a 2/3 majority of the members present and voting. What that means is basically, if you think, I'm going to be very frank now, those 3 topics, oh, I hate them, I want to get rid of them. You can have a vote on that. If more than 6 people are of the opinion, yes, we should get rid of them, then I'm forced to strike them. Or if you think we should amend the item, so say, let's not talk about countering terrorism, let's talk about countering drug trafficking, I don't know, just make that something up. Also, half the people. If you want to add another topic, you will need 2/3 of the people in the committee, which is only 7, so it's only 1 person more, to add that. And that would be a formal motion. So I've noted now that there is going to be a motion to add to the agenda the topic of how to improve human rights in Africa. I know there's also a motion to add to the agenda the topic of women's rights. Yes. So human rights and women's rights. That would then basically be topics D and E. You'd afterwards have the chance to start deleting items. I'll tell you 2 things. If we do that, I'm going to have a long session with our Secretary General later tonight and explain to him why we did not take his agenda items, which I can do. I'm here to serve the committee, not the Secretary General. Whether he likes that or not, but you know, if you vote, it says I'm under your authority. If you vote me down, I have to be voted down. At the same time, however, I will not be able to prepare a report on any of those items by tomorrow or by tonight. I could do it probably by tomorrow morning. I could give a short speech on what I think is important, or I could share a short document on Facebook. But research-wise, you would be on your own. I would still expect you to know the resolutions on the topics. So if you vote on that now, I'll start researching every resolution and report on that topic. And I'll make sure I know them, and I'll expect you to know those as well. And And now I only expect you to know what's written in the reports. I'm just saying it's more work for you. You can still do it. Also, if we add more topics, but don't delete other agenda items, that means we've got to go through 5 rounds of thematic debate statements, and then 5 rounds of talking about resolutions. That means you've got to be involved in 5 resolutions. That's, I guess, a bit too much. So if you add something to the agenda, I think the only realistic way of making sure we get to voting on that item is striking at least 1, probably even 2 items that are already on the agenda. You can add it, but if we don't strike anything, we're certainly not going to be voting on, because that means we have to have 5 rounds of speeches. Even if you just speak for 1 hour each, for 1 minute each, and I think 2 minutes. Let's say 2 minutes. That means it's half an hour, and that's without people sitting down and getting up. Half an hour just for 1 round, times 5. That's 2.5 hours. So basically, the morning is gone for the speeches. I highly doubt that we're going to be quick. So what I'm saying is, if we add items, I think if you want to debate them, we should also delete others. I'm now going to quickly look again into the rules of procedure on speeches on that. I think the person moving for the inclusion of an item has the right to give a short speech why that item should be included. So be prepared to give those speeches. Japan and Burundi. Got it now. And I'm not sure if there's speeches against that allowed. I'll quickly check that. And after that, I'll call Burundi to speak on the first motion after I've checked whether there's speeches against it allowed. Okay, 2 things. Rule 19 says any item proposed for inclusion in the agenda shall be accompanied by an explanatory memorandum and, if possible, by basic documents or by a draft resolution. I guess that's not possible. However, I'd ask people if you put in the motion to put that on the list, please prepare a 2-page document by tomorrow morning to be circulated to the other delegates to make sure they have the same knowledge as you have. It doesn't need to be perfect, but at least more than 1 page. I don't need 2 full pages, but at least a first and a second page with some words on it. The second thing is debate on the inclusion of an item in the agenda when that item has been recommended for inclusion by the General Committee shall be limited to 3 speakers in favor of and 3 against. The inclusion, the President may limit the time to be allowed to speakers under this rule. I'm going to afford up to 2 minutes to Burundi and Japan to speak on that item. I'm going to ask if another country wants to speak in favor of Burundi's proposal or in favor of Japan's proposal, to give them another minute, but only if there's also 2 speakers against. So is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of Burundi's proposal of adding another agenda item called How to Improve Human Rights in Africa? Is there a country who wants to speak on that? Is there a country who wants to speak against that, saying why we shouldn't include that on the agenda? Brazil, okay. So Burundi is going to, in a minute, give their up to 2 minutes speech. I'm going to closely watch time on why to include it. Brazil will have the same time to respond to that. And afterwards, we're going to have Japan talking about 2 minutes about why we should include women's rights on the agenda. Is there anyone else who wants to speak in favor of Japan's proposal? United States of America. You will have 1 minute for the same thing. If we find 2 speakers against, otherwise we only have 1 speaker. Is there anyone who wants to speak against the inclusion of women's rights on the agenda? There's no one willing to speak against yet. If that remains the case, we'll only have Japan speak for it. If we find another person, we'll have the United States speak for it as well, and then another person against. Burundi, you have the floor for 2 minutes to speak on why we should be including on the agenda, an item regarding how to improve human rights in Africa. I'll inform you after a minute is over, and then you have 10 seconds left.
Today, dear delegates, we have a big problem of human rights in Burundi and in other countries in Africa, because today we have violation of human rights, and we have more refugees, more about 300,000 refugees from Burundi and other countries of Africa because of it, because of that human rights just work not so good in Africa, and the institution of human rights and human rights council today not so good, and because of it we have such problems that a lot of guys from Africa and run out from this continent to other because they don't know what is human rights, and some authority governments and some terroristic groups just don't have any control before them, and because of it they violated human rights day by day. And today we have to decide this problem, and people in Africa must have the equal rights like in the world, and they must know what is a human right, and because of it our such organization is in the world, and it must work everywhere, like not only in Eurasian country, as well as it must work in Africa continent.
Thank you, Burundi. That was 1.5 minutes. United States, you have the floor for 2 minutes. No, Brazil, right? Yeah, sorry. I've got United States on the other topic and Brazil on that one. Brazil, you have the floor for 2 minutes to speak against the inclusion of the Africa topic.
Thanks for the time. So the delegation of Brazil thinks that today on our sessions we are gathered together and united in order to discuss the global issues such as terrorism, such as human rights of people. So in our agenda on the third item, we have protection of human rights of indigenous people. So this item should be somehow also adapted, all the information or suggestions that we're going to discuss today or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, all this moments or points also could be adapted in order to use it in Africa. So we, the delegation of Brazil, thinks that it's kind of would be a waste of time in order to focus on terrorism issues or in order to how to transportation corporations on the item number 2 or this the third one, as I have mentioned before. So that's why the delegation of Brazil is against in order to add this as a special separate item into our agenda. Thanks. No, I yield the time to you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you to the delegate of the United States. Brazil, I'm sorry. Thank you to Brazil. We are now going to vote right away on the question whether we should include that item on the agenda. I suppose that Kyrgyzstan is present. Is that so? If not, okay. So we've still got 10 countries that are listed as present. You have 3 options. No, you don't. It's a procedural motion, so you don't have 3 options. You have 2 options. You can either vote yes or no. There's no abstentions. So the final number needs to add up to 10. You need 7 votes in favor to include the question of how to improve human rights in Africa to the agenda. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your placard now and raise it high. If you want that to be included, raise your placard. I think Burundi wants that to be included. So you want to raise your placard high so I can see it. All those against, please raise your placard now. You're We've got to take the vote again because I've only got 8 votes in. We're supposed to have 10. Please, I'm saying again, everyone who is present and a delegate. Oh, no, hang on. Maybe I'm counting the observers. Just give me a second. And no, I'm not counting the observers. We need to have 10 votes in the end. I'm going to ask now all those who are in favor of including this item on the list to raise their placard. You either raise it now or against it. We need every placard, except for Kyrgyzstan, because you're not yet on the list, to be raised. All those in favor, please raise your placard now. And raise it high. All those in favor to include how to improve human rights in Africa, raise your placard high above your head right now. High above your head. Just raise it high as you can. As high as you can. Burundi, raise it as high as you can, please. You can higher. Yes. Okay. All those against it, please raise your placard now. High as you can. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Wonderful. This motion fails, unfortunately, because you need 7 in favor and not 7 against. And that's been our test election process. Raise them high to make sure I can see them. You never know who else you might be obstructing. So we're not going to include the approval of human rights on the agenda, but we're now going to hear for 2 minutes from Japan on whether we should include the issue of women's rights on the agenda. And I'm then going to ask again if anybody wants to speak against that. That would allow the United States to speak 1 minute in favor of it as well. Japan, you have the floor.
We know the term gender equality, but unfortunately, we didn't get real gender equality. In all countries, in most of all countries, women are discriminated according to their race, according to their disabled situation, station. And however, Japan raised such questions about women's empowerment and its lead guiding principles. There was a World Assembly for Women in Tokyo, and we had questions on how to improve women's condition. However, in asking population, we get negative answers, that women can't be employed as men. Women can't get the same salary as men. Women can't study in the same situations as men. And this situation should be, this issue should be implemented and reviewed by all countries, as it is the global topic. We know that if woman is educated, the whole generation would be educated. But unfortunately, because of physical weakness, women are continuing to be discriminated again and again. And I ask you to vote for, to discuss this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Is there, wait. Is there anyone who wishes to speak against that? If not, we are not going to have the United States speak either, because it's going to be the same amount of speakers on each side. There's no one going to speak against that. Okay, so we're going to vote. So we're going to vote right away. You can't speak if there's no one speaking against it. I'm sorry. You may sit down again, because you need your placard now, because we're voting. Now the same game again as just now, and let's see if we can get to 10 placards in total in the first try this time. We're going to vote on the proposal to include on the agenda a new item D, the 4th letter, I think, called women's rights. All those in favor of that proposal, please raise your placard high now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those against, please raise it now. All those against, please raise your placard now. We'll have to take the vote again because I did not reach 10 people. I'll say again, Everybody must raise their placard either saying yes or no, and they must please raise it high, certainly higher than the sort of headrest in front of you. That's quite helpful for me to see what's going on. All those in favor of including the issue of women's rights on the agenda, please raise your placard now and raise it high. All those against, please raise it now. This motion passes with 8 to 2 votes. So there's a new agenda item D called Women's Rights, which is going to be discussed in the same way. We're going to expect delegates to be prepared to give thematic debate statements on that agenda item. As we have 4 agenda items now, I'll still say ignore one of them. That means prepare for 3. Japan is going to prepare a document for tomorrow morning to get others on the same status. As soon as you can, if you just send it to me, I'll add my own document to it. I'll try to do some research. And as soon as we can, we are going to try to distribute it to people. Is there anyone here who has neither a laptop nor a cell phone with them? So please approach me again to make sure you're all on the Facebook group, because I will share the document or documents on the Facebook group as soon as possible. Maybe Japan can say in a minute or so what she thinks, how soon that is possible. I'll certainly deliver a statement tomorrow before we start debate on that topic as well. If there's no other motion, as in deleting an item. Okay. I would be open for a motion to adjourn the meeting until tomorrow at, I think it's 9. To adjourn the meeting until tomorrow at 9 o'clock indeed. Latvia? Are there any objections? Seeing none, the motion passes and the meeting is adjourned until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I'll be staying here to answer any questions. If Japan could just quickly approach me, that would be great. Thank you. Oh, and is there anyone of you who wishes to be part of a performance later tonight dancing for us? If so, please let me know so we can tell Dung Nguyen, our Secretary General, so he can include you on the list. Another country.
Human. Więc women as well. So woman is human, right? But it also kind of Human rights должны быть женщины, потому что женщина не human, потому что он женщина решает, что тоже нельзя. Женщина тоже хотела против женщин, просто мои
Okay, lovely. Thank you so much. Is there anyone still not in the Facebook group? Just quickly check. And if you're not, I'll send you the link via email. No, it's the UNHRC at NU Island. Just check if you're in it. Is there a group where I'm always spamming you with documents and stuff?
Ja, det går bra för dem där.